I've never really felt like I belonged anywhere. I definitely know what community feels like. I know what that love feels like. I know what support is, but I've never felt like I have been 100% seen by anybody and anyone. And I'm okay with that because I think that makes me special in a way. Like, I think that's actually why a lot of people identify with me as an artist, because when I express my inner world, like, people are like, oh, I feel that inside too. And like, yeah, and I just don't know how to translate that inner world through anything other than art.
What's good, y'all? It's your boy Bimma, and I'm so hyped to chop it up with one of Hollywood's most exciting young actors, Justice Smith. Now, you might recognize him as Ezekiel in The Get Down, but he's also made some really major moves since then, from blockbuster hits like Jurassic World to also these indie films where he's able to get real and raw, like I Saw the TV Glow. But Justice isn't afraid to push the boundaries and also get into themes about identity as well as acceptance. Fun fact, the legendary RuPaul wants Justice to play him in a biopic someday. A pretty cool fact. Now, I really feel like we're entering a new era for Justice Smith, one where it's not only about the characters that he's playing, but also the uniqueness that he's bringing to the table. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know him as the person. Y'all know what it is. This is Bars and Nuggets on Amazon Music. Let's dig in. Look, you got a chin and everything.
That's cool. That's dope.
Man.
I always say my name is a joke.
No, it's not.
It's based off a joke. I mean, I love my name. I think my name's great.
Your name is dope.
I hate when people give me nicknames.
Really?
I don't like Jay when people call me Jay. Just.
Is it like a thing where you're like, because it feels like people are trying to act like they know you and they like just met you? And they're like, what up, Jay?
People I know try to, and I say, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
What are like the worst nicknames?
One of my close friends calls me Juice.
I call my best friend Juice.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What's his name?
Jarrett.
Okay. I don't mind Juice. Juice is fine. I don't know. I just like my name.
Yeah.
It just feels a little bit like, I don't know. I really don't like when white people do it. It just feels a little bit like,
What's it
don't
feel like?
rename me. You know what I mean? I don't know.
He said don't rename
It just feels, you know what I mean? It just feels a little weird in context.
Sure. Yeah. So how do you deal with that, right? Because you come from like a biracial background. So how do you deal with that?
Well, my mom don't give me nicknames.
Your mom calls you Justice.
My mom calls me Justice, yeah. You mean like how do I deal with white people? What do you mean? Being biracial? What do you mean by that?
What I meant. You said you didn't like it when white people did it.
Yeah.
And I was asking because I was like, well, you're biracial, so it doesn't matter. That in that context, right? Why does it matter that the white people are renaming you versus the black side of you is renaming you?
What do you mean? Oh, because like I have like my mom is white.
Because you come from both communities.
Yeah, but I don't identify as white. Like no one looks at me and is like, that's a white person. You know what I mean? People look at me and see a black person. If they see a light-skinned black person, yeah, sure, but it's still a black person.
Still a black person.
And so like I still am in the context of that, Race is such a tricky thing, but like a lot of race is based off of how you look,
I mean,
ethnicity is more like what's actually in your genes.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. No, it was just coming from a place of curiosity.
No, I love talking about race. I mean, I've had to talk about it a lot. I grew up in Orange County, so I grew up around a lot of white people. And, I have a white mom and I have white family who, I've met other biracial people who it's like their white parent is like super like black allyship, like, like the ultimate white ally. And my mom isn't really like that. She's kind of, she has a heart of gold, but she doesn't really understand race to the extent that I understand it.
Or you've had to deal with it fastly.
Yeah, sure. So like growing up in a white community was really hard because I couldn't really go to her and like tell her what was going on, and like before I had language for it even.
Right, to even unpack what you were
exactly, you know. And my dad, because my parents were divorced, so like I spent time at both houses, and my dad isn't like the most, how do I word this without being disrespectful, isn't the most like intellectual about race also. So, you know, like I'll be like I've had again, there's things happening where I'm like, I want to say so many things. I just said, you know, race has always been very interesting because being biracial is a really specific racial experience. It is a black experience, but it is a specific black experience. And there's like a lot of biracial people who experience like the same like things. Like a lot of times you hear biracial people talk about like, I'm too black for the white kids, I'm too white for the black kids. You hear that a lot, which I said at one point in my life, which I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy now, but or like they'll often like feel split between two worlds, or like growing up they'll feel aracial because like they'll have multiple races in their family, so they won't really identify with one or the other. And then when they go out into the real world, depending on how they look, you know, if they're darker or lighter or whatever, and they get branded racially, then it's an adjustment for them versus like people who are one race, like they, you know, the world is treating them as that one race their entire life, you know, so, and they're around family of that one race. So it's a little bit easier to solidify your racial identity, I think. Biracial people kind of have to, I mean, some biracial people anyways, have to get out into the world and like understand that like they're a little bit behind in figuring out who they are to other people.
Has that impacted you in your career? Do you feel like that's been like something that's impacted however you decide to navigate when you decide the type of roles that you want to take, when you think about audiences and how they might receive you?
100%. Yeah, I really set out to like own, like if my parents are shown in the movie or television show I'm doing, to like make sure that they're an interracial couple, because I was like, the basis I think of my identity should be the basis of the character's identity. Like I'm a man, so I'm probably gonna be playing a man. But then again, I don't know. I could play a woman one time. I don't know. It's an ever evolving thing because I know that I set out to make sure that my parents are always an interracial couple, and then just recently I was like, I got cast in this movie that's in pre-production, and it doesn't work if the character's parents are interracial, and so it would be two black parents and then me, and I had like a reckoning with that because there is this pattern in the industry of like lighter skinned biracial people like being highlighted over darker skin, like people of one race, black people of one race, and I didn't want to participate in that. And obviously that's like if we're gonna get into it, like obviously that's like a part of this like white supremacist system that they prefer lighter skin. They view lighter skin black people as being more friendly or smarter or, you know, closer to whiteness essentially. So that's why they cast them in movies and television shows over darker skinned people. So I didn't want to participate in that as much as I could. But then I also, like just recently, I was like, but there are also lighter skinned black people who are just black, who aren't biracial, you know? So I'm like, and I also know black people who aren't biracial who play biracial roles too. So I'm like, I think that I can give myself a little bit of grace here in this movie, and I'm gonna just see how that resonates with people and see how that resonates with me, and like what my responsibility is, you know, in this like racial hierarchy.
Do you think it matters? Like just according to like kind of how we were talking before about music, right? Like if it's authentic to you, does it matter how it's received. If it feels authentic to you, does it matter how it's received by others, or what they think about how you're deciding to step into these roles, or that role in particular?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
Or do you want it to matter because
I just want to make sure my morals are right. I think I find that there are people who do things that the public is upset with, and they're like, I didn't have any bad intentions, and this is just what I believe and who I am and what I'm doing. And I'm like, yeah, but you have like a blind spot to like, you're like hurting people with what you're doing, and you don't realize that. And so I never want to like unintentionally hurt anybody. So I want to make sure I'm being responsible. And at the same time, it's like white actors, they don't have to deal with this. They can just do whatever role they want, you know? Like people of color, like actors of color have to constantly like navigate the ways that our bodies mean something on camera. They mean something to the public. We represent something. And so I had a big moment with that with the American Society of Magical Negros. Where, like, you know, that script, I fucking love that script. And I wanted to do a movie about race for a long time, but a lot of the scripts I was being sent were not my specific racial experience. And so I was like, when I read that about like palatability, like, you know, like making yourself smaller around white people in white spaces, like, I was like, oh, I get this. I grew up in Orange County, you know, I get this. I feel like I can lend myself to this. And a lot of the controversy was around, besides like the original concept of the film, it was around like me being biracial and me being light skinned, like helming this movie about race, which, you know, was, I think, a valid criticism. You know,
But why? Because you just told us about your actual experience with it, and that was also the reason why you stepped into the role. So why would those things be valid? You know what I mean?
Because Hollywood hasn't done it right by Black people, you know, for a long period of time. And so I think what's valid about it is, I think the reaction is valid. I don't think it's my fault. I don't think it's the director's fault. I think it's the system's fault. I think that, you know, Black audiences are like, we only really get like 2 or 3 Black films a year. And so when you see one and you're like, this light-skinned ass motherfucker, you know, you're just like, we're not gonna get more. And so, and that's not, versus like this American Society can exist, and also other things can exist. But it's the fact that like the things that we're not being greenlit, you know. So it's, so
you felt because it was so limited, like the opportunities that it has to be.
And I also think it's like, you know, when you see a pattern of, it's like you see light-skinned biracial people being platformed and highlighted over darker skinned people. Again, like I empathize with Black audiences being like, this is the same shit. We're seeing it again. But again, I think that speaks to scarcity. It speaks to like, this movie could have existed and been validated by Black audiences if more Black shit was being greenlit.
No, it was interesting. I remember that around the time it was being promoted, so was American Fiction, right, at the time.
The same movie.
Say more.
I mean, light-skinned director, light-skinned lead, love story in the middle, a light-skinned guy dealing with race and being palatable to white people. Same movie, but you know.
Why do you think one was received different than the other? Justice gave me that look.
I really liked American Fiction. I think timing, it came out first. I think that was honestly the biggest reason. It just came out first. And I think that like our American Society of Magical Negros, that was incendiary. And so we had to teach audiences what that was first. Like the film was a comment on film. Like, and it was ironic that a lot of the critics who trashed our film were critics who lauded magical Negro films. Like you look at the passion that they reviewed well, and it was these films that were parodying, you know, these films that were like calling out as racist and reductive. There was a lot of irony in that whole process. It was such an interesting experience though for me, because it was one of the best directors I've ever worked with, like hands down, one of the best directors I've ever worked with. One of my favorite roles I've ever played. I had such a hand in like, I was on the film for like 3 or 4 years, like improvising scenes, and like I really had a hand in creating this thing, and it was such a vulnerable role for me to play because I understood what it was like, what this character was going through of being in these white spaces, making yourself feel small to make white people feel comfortable, like, and not knowing how that like slowly kills you. And so I was like, I wish I had this film growing up. This film is so important. And for everyone to be like, audiences and critics alike to be like, no, that was shit. That's bad. No, next. It was so enlightening in a way, because it was hard for me to hold on to what was so good about it because everyone was hating it. Everyone was shitting on it.
How do you deal with that as creative, as an artist, where you want to be fully in your projects and you don't want to carry like the wounds of like opinions and things like that? How do you move on from things like that?
Time, therapy, I don't know. My therapist keeps talking to me about like, during that process, it became aware to me how much I care what other people think. Critics especially, and how much I'm trying to impress them. Even through like, I'm being present on set and I'm really feeling out my character and I'm being vulnerable and like all that stuff, and I really feel like tapped in, and at the end of the day, I cared deeply like what they thought, and I was devastated that they hated it. And I wasn't it, and it was really hard for me to hold on to the fact of like, well, I had a good time, and it was hard. And so my therapist has been just talking to me about like accepting that that's where I'm at, instead of, because I judge myself for that, because I'm like, ew, that's so ego-y to care about what other people think. But I feel like you can't really grow unless you accept where you are. And so right now I care. And I'm in a process of not caring, I guess.
That's good. Slowly. So we're gonna move next to start getting some questions from our audience here. I'm gonna come here on the front row.
Hello, my name is Michael. When you did the Magical Negros, my expectation for that movie was more of like a Black Harry Potter meets
Lovecraft Country.
Right? I thought it was going to be similar into that realm, right? After it was announced and I saw the trailer, I was like, dang, this looks kind of stereotypical, but I still went to go see it, right? And then I was like, we have Good Times, that cartoon show, which obviously was kind of stereotypical, coming out. And I was like, damn, is Hollywood pushing this agenda towards us? So like, did you feel that after you saw the movie, or did you see the movie after it came out?
American Society?
Yeah,
I saw it.
The stereotypes were gonna be taken the way it actually was towards, like.
Oh, you mean like? Yeah, the movie's a satire, so we're not saying like Black people should make space for white people and like give them everything that they want.
No, I know that, but like it's like I feel like we keep getting that satire, like we keep getting it instead of getting like movies that kind of, or TV shows like a Lovecraft Country. Like that Lovecraft Country, reason why I feel like it resonated with people where they want a season 2 even though the books are done. They want it because it's something that it's no longer satire. It's something that resonates in our soul, right? Like that when I watch Lovecraft, it's not just something this is a cool sci-fi flick. No, it resonates in my soul because this is a different way of putting Black people in a TV show or a movie that's not just like, oh, he's a game maker, oh, he's doing a satire on this, he's doing that. Like, it was so different to us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting that you thought you were like, I feel like we've seen that before. I mean, maybe I'm just not up on shit, but the reason why I loved American Society so much is because I hadn't really seen that like specific brand of racism like talked about before, like this like almost like ignorant, like microaggressive, like corporate racism, like, and that's kind of what the movie is talking about, and like this idea of palatability and what it means to be palatable, and why Black people adopt palatability as like a survival mechanism. You know, I hadn't seen that talked about before, but I mean, I'm sure that you have, I guess.
Yeah.
So like, do I feel like it's contributing to this like stereotype of media that I mean, I guess so.
I only felt that it was contributing only because right after that trailer comes out, Good Times trailer comes out,
Yeah.
right? And then when I watched that film, it made me like, okay, I'm not even gonna watch Good Times.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
cartoon
yeah.
show, because
And
when
you talking about the
cartoon show.
cartoon.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
because it was like I was like, if I watch this cartoon show, even though I know in my head I'm not gonna like it, it's gonna contribute to that getting produced and keep
Again,
getting-
again, and again.
Yes,
Hmm.
and I've been very vocal about that. Like, even in my friend group, like, we got to stop contributing to stuff that even if we see the Black lead in there, we can't contribute to something that's going to be detrimental to us in the future 10 years from now.
But
where
why
we
did you
keep
think
getting-
Magical Negros was detrimental?
I just felt like it was we're gonna get a wave of that being
Of-
pushed, and
of like racial satire you don't really
Yes.
like? Is that what you're saying?
I felt like it was gonna be because when Good Times, the cartoon show, came out, I felt like, oh shoot, we're gonna get into that wave. And when I could see a wave starting, it's like you either sit there and let the wave take over, or you run out the way, right? And I was like, okay,
Was it Lovecraft? I mean, I only saw a couple episodes, but didn't that also deal with racism too?
It dealt with it in a
It-
totally
Like in a
different aspect.
sci-fi way, right?
Yeah, but
like
not
with
just
monsters
sci-fi,
and
but it was
stuff.
more realistic.
Yeah.
It was very direct, more realistic in the aspect. Like you could take that monster side, like, and attribute it to real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you felt like Magical Negros didn't have that.
It had aspects of it, and then it was drowned out in certain parts of the movie.
And what parts in the love story?
Yeah.
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 That's the biggest issue for you. That was the biggest issue for a lot of people, was the love story.
Yeah.
Yeah, specifically because they were like, why is he dating a white girl? Yeah.
It was partly that, but it was just maybe some of her lines didn't kind of, it kind of attributed to the part that a lot of people online were talking about. Like,
What lines?
I feel like they're still stereotypical of what they would make a white woman say to a black man that when they're dating a black man. Or
Well,
what
she
we-
wasn't white. Black people just think anybody who's not black is white. She's Asian. I mean, she's biracial, but she's
But-
passing. Though.
Yeah, but like, how do I word this without sounding like
I want you to be on. Like, I want kind of
Okay.
want you. To be, I'm like
so
trying to get you to be
This is
frank
good
with
because
me.
it's good. This is a good dialogue. He's asking you to be direct.
Yeah, okay. So they've been using. I don't know if you've realized this. They did this with a Donald Glover show where his wife was Asian.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Isn't it
Mr. and Mrs.
Smith?
Smith.
Yeah, I
And
love
they've
that
been-
show.
It's been a talk that we've been having, like, is Asian becoming the new white?
Yeah,
And instead
because
of
you
like
want to
saying
see
it's
black
diverse,
love represented.
yeah, and see,
See, this is what I'm talking about though with scarcity,
yeah,
because it's not like we can't represent interracial couples. It's not like we can't represent, palatable minorities in this story about being palatable. It's that, like you said, we're now going to get a wave of this. It's because you think that like these are the only black stories that's going to be greenlit, which is an issue with the system, not the issue with the content. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. No,
it's
you're
it's the
right.
fact that it's like we should get more black stories, period, that have representations of black love. You know what I mean? That highlight darker skinned black folk in movies about, not even about race, And we can also have movies about race, and we can also have satire, and we can also have Lovecraft Country, and we can also have Mr. and Mrs. Smith. We can have it all, but we've been so accustomed to like, we're just gonna get our scraps, and so now we have to like fight to make sure the scraps that we get are like fulfill this checklist of what we want to see, which is not
Exactly.
fair to us as black audiences. I think American society wouldn't have bothered you as much, or even like I haven't seen Good Times, but
I hadn't seen it.
it might not have bothered you as much if there was just more to choose from.
yes,
You're like, everyone has a right to make the shit that they want to make. You know, that director for American society, that director, like that was his racial experience, and that's what he wanted to share. And like the people who identified with it, they got healing with it, and the people who didn't. But I think the people who didn't were like, this shouldn't exist at all. Because
I think
because
could
it's
exist
taking
if
the space of something that
yeah.
I want to identify with.
Yeah, I
Which,
think it
again,
could exist
scarcity.
if we can get more of
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that goes right back to your
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
But thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I
This is
appreciate the
good.
dialogue.
This is a good
Yeah.
dialogue.
Yeah, no, because I was kind of nervous at first of being like completely honest.
No, I
was like-
wanted you to. That's why I was
He
like,
was
what
welcome.
say
He-
what you mean?
Yeah.
I didn't intervene because he kept asking, so I was like, he wants to have this conversation with you.
So I appreciate that 100%. 'Cause a lot of times people would try to dive away from that, and the fact that you were like, okay, let's take this on.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the current film,
Okay.
right? I saw the TV Glow working with A24. They have a very distinct style of storytelling. What drew you into to work with them first, and then the project itself?
I always wanted to work with them. I had them on my manifestation list. I just like that they take risks. I really like that when you go see an A24 project, you know it's going to be original. You know, I feel like originality, it's slowly disappearing because of fear that it's not going to make money. And I applaud A24 for just platforming original shit. Because I really think that's what audiences want. I mean, we're in this age right now where everything is nostalgia, reboot.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want that.
Yeah, I think we're out of balance of what we do want, and I feel like we're at a place where maybe we're getting a lot of things just because, to your point, which you already shared, they can predict that it may make a certain degree of money, and so it's a lot of those things. But where's the artful side of things, where it's where are we giving opportunities for new stories, new sequels, if we even want them.
Yeah, true.
What did you enjoy about working on this film?
When I read it, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I just read. I have to do this movie because it was such a trip.
Tell us more about that. What it and maybe even so take us into the process of reading the script for the first time, and what are you looking for when you're reading this script?
When I read it, I was like, I didn't fully understand it, but I felt it. I think when I'm reading a script, I know it's good when I can feel it.
Yeah.
When the words of the character that they want me to play just come out of me naturally. I'm like, that's kind of like a barometer that I should be a part of it, or that I like it anyways.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about, and this is it's in the horror genre, right? And there's always different themes, societal themes, I feel like, when it comes to horror in particular. What elements of this did you feel really connected to you, right? Where you felt I was really feeling it. When you think about what this film's trying to tackle, what connected?
I'm a big horror fan. I've been a big horror fan since I was young. This movie is, I was like, this is an epic. It's almost like an odyssey of a character. It tracks the character over 30 years, and we slowly watch this person decay. And I thought that was a really interesting arc. Usually you watch a character mature, and become more themselves, and more self-assured, and this character just becomes less themselves, less authentic. I thought that was really interesting. I'd watched the director Jane Schoenbrunn. I'd watched her first film, and again, they have this talent for creating films that get under your skin, and TV Glow, I think, is not the most linear. It requires a rewatch to fully understand, but it's you watch it and it moves you, and you're like, what? I don't even understand what really happened, but I feel different, and I feel like I need to scream or change who I am, or and I like art like that. I read that script. I was like, this is a once in a lifetime project. It's a once in a lifetime part. So
and you were playing in aspects of it, you were playing a ninth grader.
Yeah,
right.
I played a 15-year-old at one point.
What was that like? You know, because you're not that age, so how do you like get into the mindset of?
I've been playing a teenager for a long time, but I was like, this is the last time I'll probably play a teenager because the way they had to cake my face in makeup to like make me look younger, I said I look crazy. Danielle Deadweiler, she plays my mom. And there's like a scene where I'm lying in her lap, and like the scene before it, you see like there's a younger actor who's playing my 13-year-old self, who's actually 13, and then my 27-year-old ass is playing a 15-year-old, and I'm like, there's no way in hell, like this is what he would look like in 2 years, and so I'm lying in her lap, like trying to scrunch myself up much as possible, like trying to make myself small, but I'm like this giant next to her because she's really short.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was, I was like, this is the last time I'll play.
What was the most challenging thing about trying to get into that mindset? Because, you know, it is like a age difference. And like, to your point, you're like, yo, I'm kind of getting out of the space. But so, you know, obviously you're very serious about your approach and your craft. So take us a bit into what's that process? How do you get authentic in that process?
I don't play ages. I try not to play ages. I play states of mind. So for this character, he is deeply uncomfortable in his body, in his skin, and he has almost a disconnect from his body. So a lot of that for me was making sure that my voice felt stuck in my upper chest and in my throat, and that when I walked, like I try to take out as much flow as possible, so it was almost stiff. And then as he gets older, his voice becomes higher and tighter and like weaker, and his body and his joints become even more stiff, and as he slowly like decays. But the 15-year-old version of him just still has some life in it. So it was really just kind of tracking like where in his decaying he was.
What was the inspiration for trying to get into that role? Like, do you search for that, or do you search for that in other people in your life? Like, how do you start to?
Yeah, part of it is just like my observations about people, and then like taking pieces from different like behaviors and putting them into one person. I also like understanding the type of movie the filmmaker is trying to make. So watching their first film, I brought elements of that protagonist because like her tone and her energy was just kind of like if you watch the film, there's like a lot of space and it's almost quiet, and like there's like a stillness to it. So just kind of like bringing that element. So there was like parts of me that was like playing that protagonist from that first film.
Yeah.
Parts of me was playing Boogie Nights is one of my favorite movies. And I just worked with Julianne Moore. And I watched an interview of hers when she was doing Boogie Nights, talking about how she wanted to create a separation of voice and body. And so I stole that from her for this one. And then I told her, I was like, I stole this from you. And she was like, no, you're actually thinking of Safe, this other movie I did. And I was like, well, Julie, I haven't seen that movie.
I haven't seen that one, so it was definitely this.
Sure, it was Boogie Nights, but whatever. But I'm not going to argue with her.
What did you like about Boogie Nights so much, right? Like,
I just love that movie. I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I think he's great. I think I like Sex. Like, I mean, Sex is I think Sex is just great.
Yeah.
No, like it's
it can be as simple as that.
It's a great topic. Like I think for art, I think because it's human. I mean, it's also why I like horror. I just like kind of like these things that remind us that we're animals. The experience of watching horror like evokes like feelings of fear and survival.
Yeah.
You know, and sex obviously is like everyone is doing it, you know, in their own way.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm always trying to remind myself that I am an animal. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, you know, I'm sure like fans will share like their favorite movies of yours that you've been in, and I'm curious if a fan's ever shared, like, hey, I saw myself in this role.
Yeah.
That you played.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you? And I'd be curious also of like a recent time. Is there a role where that's happened that you can recall?
TV Glow.
Mm.
You know, the director is trans, and there's the movie is an allegory for transness, and there's a lot of like trans people who are watching the film and just like bawling and just talking about how much it's meant to them. And like there are trans people who watch the film and there's this term in the trans community called their egg crack moment, which I just learned about, which is like the moment you realize that you're trans. And that this movie is being that for like a lot of people. Like it's being that moment for them where they're like, I can't hide anymore. I have to be myself. That's really meaningful. And I've had a couple of roles where people like tell me how much they identify with it and how much like they feel themselves like represented, that they feel seen, which is beautiful to me and makes me feel really good, because I had a moment a couple of years ago where I was confused on what my purpose was in all this.
As an actor?
As an actor, yeah. I think the business side of this can really be like soul-sucking. And I was trying to remind myself why I'm doing this, because I was miserable. I was a little bit miserable.
Was it around the time of a certain project?
I'm not going to tell you that. But yeah.
Was it a trap? Was it a trap?
Yes, it was.
It's a good interview.
So I was like, why am I doing this? And for a second I dabbled with like, maybe I'm doing this like because I can represent communities, and I can like take this like activist approach to it, and like maybe pick roles that change the world and mean something to people. And I found that when I was doing that, I still was externalizing my intention. It was still for other people, and it was still putting a lot of pressure on me.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I don't have the mental fortitude for that. And what I landed on was, I looked back at my childhood and I was like, well, why did I like this in the first place? And it was all about my own actualization. I would find characters and monologues and scenes in acting class that had something to do with what was going on in my personal life, and finding answers in like playing another person's story with like the things that I was going through. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
And so like my characters, the projects I was doing were like directly healing me, like in like my own relationships in my own life. And so that's kind of what I returned to. And I also was like, for a moment, like, and still am, obviously, with the whole critics thing, but like obsessed with quality. And like, I was being like, I have to be good. Like, I have to be great. I want to be a great actor. I want to be good, which again, externalized my intention. But then now whenever I like approach it through, what is the scene I'm shooting today? How does the scene I'm shooting today inform something that's going on in my real life? Then I actually indirectly am like giving great performances. And indirectly, I'm representing people and communities and providing healing for other people, because it's like on all the projects in which I prioritize myself are the projects that like people are identifying with. And this is why I always say, you make art for yourself. You make art that you think is good and is right and is vulnerable and true. And it'll do all of those other things.
Right.
Do
you ever think you would do a project where you were just completely disconnected from like the experience of the character, where it's just like, this is not me, ever, will never be me?
I've definitely read a script and was like, I don't identify with this at all. And I don't, I've done stuff for money. Because I need money, and it's a job.
It's a part of that the part of when you think about, because you were mentioning like there's a part of the industry where you feel like it's, is the part that you don't love. Is that an aspect of it? Yeah.
It's an annoying thing, capitalism, but everyone's got to work.
Yeah.
I'm blessed that my job is really fulfilling at times, but then at other times it's a job, and I have to feed my family, and I have to pay my mortgage, and I have to, and so I think in those times when I'm doing those films that I'm just doing for money, I felt like I lost myself a little bit. And so I'm learning now to like really find the balance and on those projects that are, they say like one for me, one for them.
Yeah.
So they say.
Yeah.
So like on those projects that are for them, whoever they are,
Whoever they are.
I'm like trying to still instill these like, okay, so how does this influence my personal life? Like I'm still trying to find the thing. But I also think that it comes natural. Like I'll do movies that I don't identify with on paper, but when you're doing it, I just find how I can relate to it. You know, that is kind of my job as an actor, is to always, no matter how different it is for me, to find how it relates to me. And I'm blessed that comes naturally.
Here. Okay, we're gonna go on the back row here.
Yes. Hi, Justice.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. I'm Malik. What I wanted to ask is kind of a two-part question. When you are going about, picking your roles, going through your career, and really just going throughout your entire life, any decision that you make, do you feel more of a responsibility to yourself, being true to yourself, or is there any part of you that becomes a little bit overwhelmed with a responsibility to the Black race, the Black culture, feeling like you have to kind of, fit into a certain identity?
Yes.
And then with that, how does that affect your sense of belonging?
Jesus Christ.
Malik said, we gonna be here another hour.
Yeah, I know.
We're going to go into overtime, but it's okay.
I think being Black is so much a part of who I am that now that I know who I am, that's become easier to make decisions like based off of who I am and how I represent the Black community, because I just am representing myself because I am Black, because I identify. I think earlier, like as I was trying to figure out who I was, that it was a little bit hard. And it's still, have you ever read this book? It's called, I'm going to butcher the title. It's called Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks. And it's about the history of cinema and how all Black characters are one of these like original archetypes, like in relation to whiteness. Yeah. It's a really interesting book, really interesting book, and it's jaded me in a lot of ways. So like I read a lot of scripts where I'm like, the characters I read, the characters that are just written for like Black folk aren't the best, aren't the most nuanced. And so it's really hard to kind of like cipher through like the pros and cons of like lending myself to a project or lending myself to a character. Again, I find that the more I stay true to myself, the more I as a byproduct, stay true to the community. And the second half of your question was, how do I find a sense of belonging?
Yes.
I'm not looking for that anymore, I don't think. I've never really felt like I belonged anywhere. I definitely know what community feels like. I know what that love feels like. I know what support is. But I've never felt like I have been 100% seen by anybody and anyone. And I'm okay with that, because I think that makes me special in a way. Like I think that's actually why a lot of people identify with me as an artist, because when I express my inner world, like people are like, oh, I feel that inside too. Yeah, and I just don't know how to translate that inner world through anything other than art. So, yeah, I'm happy that I don't belong.
You've gotten to a place where it's not to say that if you did belong, you would like great, but you're also at a place where you're not looking for the validation to belong. You do belong, as you already said, to a community, and that community's embraced you, and that's the community that you embrace.
Yes.
And that's fair.
Yeah, I belong to an extent. Yeah.
I mean, because it's like you spend your whole life trying to please other people.
Yeah. I mean, I know that well. I grew up a big people pleaser, and that's something that I've had to unpack. I think belonging to me is feels like a blanket. It feels like I don't have to say anything and I'm understood. It feels like the ultimate. I don't know, like someone is seeing me like in all that I am. And I haven't experienced that. I've yearned for that, but I haven't experienced that. But I've experienced stuff close to it, and I'm okay with that, because I think I'm slowly learning how to give that to myself. I'm slowly learning how to see myself and belong to myself.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Are there projects that you've read, that you've been interested in, but you're like, not the right time?
Yeah.
Any you can speak on?
No. I find that there are projects that I love and that I want, and then I'm told that it's not the right time by the universe. And then I'm like disappointed, but then like I like realize, like I sit on it and I realize I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have been ready for that.
It's funny how that happens, right? Because sometimes you can be so passionate and feel like you really want something, but sometimes it's hindsight, right? And you look back and like, it wasn't the right time. Even, I think about, my particular career, and I wanted like a certain moment. I wanted like this stage moment for this interview. And I wanted it like 4 years ago, and I got it like last year. And when I got it, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't have been ready for this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now
But
you're ready.
It's I think it's part of the experience. Like you have to go through these periods of like wanting something, but then figuring out the patience and the other things that you do that do end up preparing you for things that you can't even foresee yet. You know what I mean?
You have to trust that the journey is a part of it.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. There are things that I really fall in love with that I'm like, but I want this.
Yeah.
And then it's not mine. And then usually when it comes out, I'm like, oh, I'm actually glad that I wasn't a part of it because it wasn't good. Or, or like I just wouldn't have been right for it. Or, while that film was shooting, I actually got this other film that like I loved or whatever it is. Like it's always for a reason.
Yeah.
And you have to trust, I'm gonna get a little hippie here. You have to trust that the universe knows what you want, and that it's the way you get there is not gonna be the way you think. You have to like be open to the fact that the universe is always pushing you towards the thing that you want, and sometimes the thing that you need. And sometimes the thing that you don't realize that you want, but you actually want. Sometimes the thing that you don't want that you actually need. And all the things, but you gotta trust the journey.
Yeah.
You really gotta trust the journey. It's fucking hard because ego and
Of course, all the other outside things start to come in, but it's a practice of being present. You mentioned presence earlier.
Presence is the most important thing.
How did you start to work on your presence, right? And the reason I ask is because we have an audience of creatives that typically tune in, and what you spoke on is really hard. It is really hard to say, especially when you need to get paid. It is really hard to be like, well, I want this thing. I actually need this thing right now. Or I want this role right now, or I need this award, or whatever, this recognition. How do you get to a place regularly where you try to ground yourself and you try to, and you're present? What's been that journey for you?
I think I just try to list things that are in my immediate surroundings in my head. Like if I start thinking too much about the future, I'll be like, okay, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm looking at the table and I'm looking at the audience and I'm on camera. Like that really kind of grounds me in the here and now.
Okay.
Also, finding something that is more important to you than the thing that you want. Does that make sense? Like for me, it's finding something. The certain goals that I want to achieve in my career, a lot of them are rooted in like how other people are going to view me. Like, like there's certain successes that I want, and then that will garner the respect that I really want, So
Gotcha.
it's like, it's still external of me. And I find that like, the more I try to find things that are just for me, like decorating my house, which I love doing. Like I always am like working on something, putting wallpaper up or painting something or, that that really means a lot to me. Or like ordering takeout and like watching a new show like with my fiance, that means a lot to me. So like I try to find the things that really that are my life, and then my career supports my life. You know?
Yeah, it's
So-
not your life.
Exactly. Yeah, because at one point it was like my career was everything.
Yeah.
And then I realized, especially as an artist, like you have to live in order to have reference for art, in order to have resources
Yes.
for art.
You
You
have
know?
to have an actual life.
Exactly. Your art can't be everything, because then it's just self-reflective art. It's just art based off of the other art that you already made.
Right.
It's not based off of any experience that you're having.
Yeah.
So I try to make sure I'm prioritizing experiences like that are just for me.
Yeah.
And that helps with presence, I think.
How do you feel about other people that want experiences for you? So, for example, there's a clip of you and Kelly Clarkson, and like RuPaul was like, "I want
know.
Justice
So
to,
cool.
to play me."
So cool.
How do you feel about that? Like you're like
So dope.
be into it.
Yeah. Hell yeah. That's so dope. I mean, I didn't even know he knew who I was. But like for him to know who I am and then to like my work enough that he wants me to play him, that's so flattering. It's so dope. And I'm a big Drag Race fan. I watch a lot of Drag Race. My fiance got me into it. So I would absolutely do it. And I found all these clips of him in the 80s. I started like watching and saving.
Did you know him like before like the Drag Race show? Like did you know RuPaul, but like know who he is like in relation to the 80s clips that you were watching?
I knew who he was from the show.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was super cool.
I mean,
Yeah, that was dope.
It's like, wow, like this iconic figure that, is looked up to in the community is like, wants me to like reflect their story.
Yeah. I'm always like, I try not to do biopics because I don't see myself as an impressionist. Like I'm not very good at like imitating people. Like I'm good at imitating behavior. Does that make sense? And like creating original characters.
Yes. Because you can pull from so many different places.
Like I have to find them within myself. I can't like my characters. I don't like it when they're a mountain to climb. I like it when they're like a something to mine inside of myself. So I think it would, if it ever does happen, it would be like a really challenging thing, and I would have to find like the route into doing it. But I would be so down. So I'd be down.
You'd be done.
He doesn't watch it, does he? Who doesn't?
Oh, speaking of kind of these roles that you're talking about and the roles that you appreciate, is it an aspiration in your career to be a household name?
I don't know. You're asking me so many questions where I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the answers. Like I'm still learning. Like I really feel like everybody else.
And that's okay. We can leave it.
No, and that's okay. No, but like I really like I got asked the other day, like they're like, in 10 years, Justice Smith, like finish the sentence, in 10 years, Justice Smith will be, I'm like 10 years older. Like I don't know. There are things that I want for my career, but I'm also trying to be open to the fact that it might be different. Like that's not what God wants for me. Like that's not what the universe wants for me. Like I feel like when I get too attached to like this needs to happen, like I'm setting myself up for disappointment. I like to lower my expectations and then everything is a gift.
Everything, yeah.
And then everything is a surprise. And
No, that's real. Like you allow it to take shape and you step in. I mean, it's also part of the practice of being present as you've shared.
Yeah.
You're not trying to be somewhere else. You're trying to be in the moment, and what's there you can receive and decide if it's for you or not.
Exactly. Yeah. I think right now in this moment, my biggest thing that I want is to be respected by people I respect as an artist. And I haven't fully unpacked that and what that's rooted in, but I think that's really, like, I want to be able to be like, I've attached myself to this movie, like let me hit up this actor to like see if he wants to do this with me, like, stuff like that.
Is there an artist, whether they are an actor or some other discipline, that you admire and respect?
Jeffrey Wright. Ironically enough.
Yeah. No, that's what.
Jeffrey Wright is, I mean, a lot of people say I look like a younger Jeffrey Wright, which I hope I get to play his son one day. Viola Davis.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with her. I think she's very underrated, even with all the success that she has. I think she's still underrated.
It's crazy.
There's a lot of contemporary people I like too, like Dominique Fishback. I really like. Myha'la Herald. Do you know Myha'la Herald? She was in that show Industry. She was the lead of that show Industry. She was in the Bodies.
Yes. Okay.
She's a really good actress. Yeah.
If you could think of like a quality that you admire of these folks, what would it be?
When I see a good performance and I think it's a good performance, it's because I believe everything that they're saying, and like they're like relating it back to their own experience. Like movies are kind of ruined for me because I know what's going on, and so like when I watch movies, I'm not as in the fantasy as I think other people are and non-actors are, and so what I'm watching is like the craft. I'm watching like what are the techniques that they're using to really get into this moment, and like often with Viola, I analyze her work from that lens, and I can just see the way she always like roots everything in a personal intensity that I only wish I could do. Like that's like something I really want to do. Yeah, I mean, I'm just always looking for authenticity. I'm looking for authenticity, and I'm also looking for transformation. Like Jeffrey Wright is really transformative. Have you seen Angels in America?
I have not.
That was, oh God, he's incredible in that.
I will not.
Basquiat, you should watch Basquiat. But yeah, like it's when you can. It's one thing to be true, because there's a bunch of different types of actors. There are actors who are like they are true. Like when they perform, they are true. They are authentic. Now every single one of their characters is kind of the same, is similar, but like what you get from them is authentic. It's always real. You're always like, I believe everything they're saying. And then there are actors who are like character actors, who it's like they play a bunch of different people, and you put them together and you're like, that's not even the same person, but every single one is true and feels true. And I admire that. I admire both talents. I think both talents are really hard to do, but I'm always like trying to like incorporate certain things into my craft from watching those two different types of actors.
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
Yeah,
this has been really good to like just get to know a little bit more about you and process and just the experience of
I hope I'm like
actually
saying stuff and not.
No, like genuinely, like you can feel it when, you know, the way, that's what I love about being in these environments, is that we actually get to feel real energy of like the conversations.
Yeah, this is cool. I hope you interview more actors. I know it's a music show, but I'm sure a lot of actors would love to come on this.
Thank you, Justice.
Yeah.
Make some noise for Justice. Make some noise for yourself.
What love. What love.
This is great. This is super.
Look at this. This is so
Like you literally, this is like the funnest thing.
I know.
I'm
This
flying
is like
to
the
town.
best interview I've ever done.
Oh man,
This is so good.
Speaking for the camera.